Hello, what's cooking up in the kitchen? It's me with the DNF tag. I was tagged by Brian over at Bookish, and this is a tag by Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. And you should definitely check out their channel, which is what I did after I was tagged. And they are a very fun channel. Fun channel, and came up with some good, fun prompts for the DNF tag, which is the did not finish tag, which oftentimes shows up on Goodreads as a thing of, I did not finish a book. And these are the probing questions of why? So the prompts are, do you DNF? Yes, even though what I actually find is on such places as Goodreads, I don't have a DNF thing. I have a couple of categories. I have the abandoned category, and I have the unfinished category, and sometimes a little bit of a crossover, tiny bit of a crossover. I have the hated category, but I don't actually have a DNF category. But if you look at my abandoned category, which has 21 books in it, this shows you that, well, if you want to be complete numbers wonk, I have 1,653 books that I have recorded as read on my Goodreads channel. That is me at the very beginning being very enthusiastic and going back through all of my history of books and kind of trying to put as many books on there as possible. So I'm an old dude-ish, old slow reading dude-ish. So that came up with 1,653 books that I've read. My abandoned category is my largest. I didn't read it for whatever reason category, of which there's 21 books on it. Now that probably means I don't remember a lot of the books. I think I started on Goodreads in like 2013 or something like that. So I probably don't really remember books that I abandoned there. But if you do the math from that, that means I have a 1.27% abandoning rate, which is pretty low. But I think that is probably pretty low. It's probably more like 5 or 10%. 5%, probably 5% of books that I DNF. If you DNF a book, does that count towards books read for the month? I think you see on Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, the two hosts there had a bit of a discussion over, like, there was one very kind of more hard lined on that. I forget their names at the moment. It's very hard line, like, you have to read the entire book all the way to the very end, and that means you've actually read the book. Another was like, well, okay, yeah, if you read the first chapter, then you didn't really read the book. But if you got like 50% of the way through, or 75% of the way through, that should kind of count towards reading it. I think I find, like as I do with kind of like reviews for books, if I find that if I've abandoned a book for a reason that I feel very strongly about, that I want to communicate to other readers, I will rate that book. And I will say at the very beginning, I didn't finish this book, and these are the many reasons why I didn't finish this book. Because I think that's actually a valuable thing as one reader to communicate to another reader of, this book, for whatever reasons, pushed my buttons. I disliked it for these reasons. And I think as one reader to another reader, that is a valuable service, and that should also count as I've read the book. Yes, the book might completely turn itself around. That's why I would probably reserve that to at least get 50% way through the book. I feel like at that point I've gotten a good enough feel for it. Often with books like that, if I'm like, oh God, I hate this book, I'll go into Wikipedia or somewhere and I'll find out the general plot line continuing on, just to sort of check, am I definitely DNFing the book, but also to go with, oh yeah, the things I hated this half of the book continued in the other half of the book, and I'm really glad I didn't waste my time reading that. Is there a difference between DNF and just putting it down for a bit? Yeah, there is. There are books that, well, it's fuzzy, because there's some books I go, I'll get back to that later, but over time, over years, it becomes functionally, I DNF the book. There are other books that I've actually circled back around to. If you want to expand this to series, a very recent in my reading is the Thomas Cromwell series that Hilary Mantel has done. I read Wolf Hall when it came out, when it initially came out, I think 2013 or something like that. And it was okay, but it was one of these things like I didn't feel like I wanted to continue on with the series. That's actually an interesting thing of like, do you consider just reading the first book in a series DNFing? Because I feel like I've totally DNF'd the Wheel of Time series. I read the first book in that and went, yeah, that was okay. I'm not reading any more of it. And there's a lot of especially big chunky fantasy series where I'll read the first one and go, yeah, yeah, I don't need to read anymore, and I've DNF'd it. So Wolf Hall was one that you could say the Thomas Cromwell books I DNF'd until Jason got me going this year, and I read Wolf Hall again, enjoyed it a lot more. Read Bring Up the Bodies, really loved that, and read Mirror in the Light, which I'm still thinking about. And at some point, I will actually come out with a little review on that. The now Booker long listed Mirror in the Light by Hilary Mantel. Okay, what popular books? What's a popular book that you have DNF'd? I was looking through my list of many abandoned books. Natchez Burning, Greg Iles would be maybe is a good example of one. That's actually an interesting one where instead of it being a chunky fantasy, where I was like, I don't want to go on. It's just like Greg Iles. I find his story, his method of storytelling was just like he was. He's a good writer, but it was just like I felt like he was just taking way too long to tell a story that could have been told a lot more efficiently. And that's just taste. That one definitely is just a taste one of, okay, I read probably 50 or 60% of that book, but in the end it was just like I didn't go on with it. Just too long, and it was going to be one of these books that is going to be a part of a whole trilogy, which at which point slow reader like myself, I just kind of went, no, that's fine. I don't need to go on. So yeah, there's a popular book that I DNF'd. What book do you wish you had DNF'd? Actually, that would be yet another big chunky series. Stephen R. Donaldson, not Stephen R. Donaldson, Neil Stephenson did. Oh, Stephen R. Donaldson. That's a whole different story. Uh, um, uh, Neil Stephenson did a super long series, Quicksilver, uh, super long series of books that I did. I went through them all, and I can't remember them now, and I can't help but feel that they were a bit of a waste of time for me, in that I read them because Neil Stephenson at that point had built up. Really loved Crypticomicon, which sort of is these three books could almost be seen as prequel books to that. There's some historical characters that are related to characters that show up in Crypticomicon. Um, but that was a series where I can't remember anything from it now. So it's like I really feel like I probably wasted my time with those books. They passed right through me in a torrent of info dumps, which weren't as entertaining as other info dumps that I'd read by Neil Stephenson. Which is info dump is not an insult in science fiction and fantasy. Well, not in at least science fiction. Explaining stuff is kind of a feature, not a bug in science fiction. Um, do you ever attempt to reread a DNF? Has this ever been successful for you? I think probably the biggest example of something that's been a success for me was a book that I just wasn't ready for when I first tried it, and that was Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I I read the first bit of that book as a young man, and it was like, oh my God, this is so boring. This is so slow. I probably I probably slammed into the whaling chapters where he goes through basically all the uses of the whale, and it's super obsessive. And I put down the book. I DNF'd it. But then good hunky years later, I came back to the book, and actually I found the whaling, the boring whaling sections, actually just hooked into the whole thing of the novel. This is a novel about obsession and the Melville's kind of obsessive kind of creation of the whaling industry, of all the uses for whales, all that just kind of that became chapters that I actually really loved about the book. So that was a book where I came back to it and it was like, am I reading the same book? It's like, I am. I'm just a different person. I'm a different reader, and they're like, wow, that was the right time. So that was that's a striking example of when when a DNF was definitely a success for me. And it shows that this is a lot of times there's a lot of times that maybe, okay, maybe a book just sucks, but there's other times when it's just you're just not ready for the book, and you can go back to it. And it's probably being able to judge the difference is what tortures tortures us all. It's like, what do you do with books? Number 7, what do you do with books that you DNF? Um, um, a lot of books that I have my abandoned and hated list, and those are books that they leave the house. They leave the house immediately. They get they just get donated back into the stream. I think on Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, they're like, "Oh, you're inflicting terrible books on on other people," and they were saying it kind of jokingly, but it was like, no, this is just not the right book for me, and I hated it. But there's always other people out there who love a book, and especially if you're donating a book, that means, hey, even if you think it's a terrible book, at least whoever's going to get it, the copy next, isn't going to be wasting full price on a book, and yeah, so yeah, number and that said, there are books that I have, like I've got my unfinished books where I've got like Gravity's Rainbow, Blood Meridian, Ulysses. They're books that I've gone, I there's enough there that I've kind of gone, okay, I'll hold on to the book. So those ones I've held on to, but there is other stuff like, actually it's interesting, like Incredibly Loud and Incredibly Close, the My Name is Red, The Corrections, Sapiens, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, The Dervish House, Marcel Proust, A Life, the Autobiography of Mark Twain, Volume 2, The Sympathizer. Those are all, Natchez Bernie, those are all books that if I did actually own them, I don't own them anymore. They left. They left, indeed. Number 8, do you choose more or less risky titles because of your stance on DNF? Yeah, I'd say I try and investigate what I'm going to read before I read it. I don't kind of just throw myself into books a lot with absolutely no knowledge, just because I have a tendency it does take me a while to kind of make that decision. It's rare that there's a book where I kind of go, oh, I can kind of tell right off the bat I'm not going to like this, and I can just shut it and put it away. I usually find I have to give it so much time that I try and be cautious about the books that I read. That I join strange cabals on the internet like BookTube, to really suss out books and hear multiple people talk about them. And until it finally kind of filters in, and I go, okay, just maybe I'll give that a try. So yes, and number 9, tag 5, BookTube buddies, or however many people you want. And I did not finish this tag, so there you go.